The harsh reality of medieval castle living. Forget romantic notions of majestic medieval castle life. The reality was far less glamorous. Even royalty awakened with aching backs after sleeping on what amounted to sacks of straw that remained unchanged for months. Medical texts from the era actually documented treatments for injuries caused by bedding materials. The wealthy nobility had the dubious privilege of sleeping on wooden frames supporting their straw mattresses, essentially discomfort with elevation. Morning arrivals weren't heralded by gentle alarm sounds but rather by roosters screeching at dawn, or in some documented cases, by designated servants whose sole responsibility involved trudging through corridors shouting wake-up calls. Perhaps history's most universally despised occupation. The massive stone walls that effectively repelled armies also functioned as enormous refrigerators. Many residents slept in their daytime clothing not from laziness, but as protection against freezing temperatures. Windows were typically narrow slits, designed for defensive purposes rather than allowing sunlight, meaning castle dwellers often awoke in complete darkness, navigating by touch and frequently colliding with chamber pots. Personal cleanliness presented its own trials. Morning routines began with ice-cold water buckets. No temperature controls existed. Some innovative castle designers attempted primitive water heating systems by running pipes near kitchen fires, creating the unfortunate choice between remaining dirty or risking lead poisoning. Medieval soap consisted primarily of wood ash mixed with animal fat, essentially cleaning oneself with fireplace residue. Wealthier establishments used expensive Castile soap, made with olive oil costing approximately the same as an entire sheet. Imagine devoting a whole paycheck to basic hygiene products. Nature's calls involved either chamber pots or guard robes. Narrow windows serving dual purposes as arrow slits in impromptu toilet. Castle architects even had specific terminology for these features, named because people hung clothes nearby, believing the terrible odors would repel moths. Chamber pots were typically emptied directly from windows, giving rise to warning shouts of garde-l'eau, definitely not referring to water. Communal facilities built into outer walls deposited waste directly outside. Archaeological excavations reveal interesting items in these areas beyond coins and jewelry. With up to 200 castle inhabitants sharing limited facilities, morning rushes took on entirely new meanings. Privacy barely existed in medieval times. Historical documents show even monarchs receiving morning visitors while using elaborate private facilities, considered an honor for guests. Royal servants assisted with morning routines including washing, dressing, and chamber pot management. Records indicate the position of groom of the stool was highly sought despite its unglamorous responsibilities, because it provided intimate royal access. After completing morning routines, breakfast awaited, though breakfast might generously describe what was served. Fresh bread scents mingled with porridge aromas, but castle breakfast followed strict hierarchical rules. The king received the best options while lower-ranked staff consumed pottage, essentially boiled vegetables that had barely avoided spoiling. Bread served multiple purposes beyond consumption. Nobles used trenchers, thick stale bread slices functioning as plates. After several days of service as dinnerware, these rock-hard bread plates were distributed to the poor, who needed extraordinary dental strength to consume them. Well water was frequently contaminated due to primitive waste disposal methods. The solution: beer, substantial quantities for everyone, including children, who received weaker small beer. Castle records indicate approximately 8 gallons consumed weekly per person. Brewers held vital positions. Problematic beer meant thirsty, irritable inhabitants. Table manners barely existed. Forks were considered unnecessarily fancy. Everyone used fingers, leading to interesting eating techniques. One dining guide actually warned against wiping greasy hands on beards, The mere existence of such advice speaks volumes about mealtime etiquette. Seating arrangements created political minefields where proximity to nobility indicated importance. Historical records document sword fights erupting over seating closer to salt, the medieval equivalent of prime internet access. Medieval castle floors weren't pristine stone surfaces, but covered with rushes, dried grass and herb layers only completely replaced annually. Fresh layers were occasionally added, but underneath lay accumulated food scraps, mud, animal droppings and miscellaneous debris. Fragrant herbs were scattered in desperate attempts to mask what essentially functioned as indoor compost heap. Animals roamed freely through great halls. Dogs, cats, poultry and occasionally livestock contributed their own special elements to the castle's aromatic profile. One account describes a nobleman's falcon relieving itself directly on the dining table, apparently commonplace enough to generate minimal reaction. Wall hangings served practical purposes beyond decoration, containing dampness and mold. Rarely cleaned, these tapestries developed their own ecosystems of mildew, insects and rodent habitats. Kitchen areas created particularly powerful odors. Without refrigeration, meat was often prepared just before spoiling, masked with excessive spice. Waste was tossed directly from kitchen windows, creating what one writer delicately termed interesting aroma mountains. The worst offenders were the guard-robe toilets emptying directly down castle walls into surrounding ditches. Summer created what one chronicler described as unique defensive systems. Sieges were occasionally abandoned due to overwhelming odors. Medieval castles weren't merely stone mansions, but elaborate defensive structures. Walls reached thicknesses of 20 feet at base. Archers trained to shoot through narrow slits with remarkable precision, striking dinner plate-sized targets from 200 yards, the same individuals who sometimes missed castle latrines at close range. Murder holes, ceiling openings above entryways allowed defenders to drop various materials onto attackers. Castle account books list oil barrels, quicklime and occasionally beehives among defensive supplies. Everyone had assigned roles during sieges, including children serving as messengers or water carriers. Moats served purposes beyond collecting waste from those charming toilets. Some featured sophisticated water management systems, allowing rapid flooding or drain. Drawbridge operators held critical positions. Historical documents record instances of flustered operators raising bridges prematurely or trapping livestock. Perhaps most ingenious were spiral staircases, always curving clockwise when ascending, giving right-handed defenders advantages during sword fights. Steps were intentionally uneven, allowing familiar defenders to navigate quickly while attackers stumbled. One medieval chronicle records an attacking force retreating after tumbling down stairs like drunken geese. After exhausting defensive training, castle residents needed relaxation. Entertainment took unusual forms by modern standards. Jousting sometimes featured blindfolded knights or backward-riding competitors. Dice games flourished despite frequent prohibitions, with castle accounting books dedicating sections to gambling debt. Jesters were medieval celebrities who could criticize nobility in ways that would send others to dungeons. Historical records show some jesters earned more than military officers, indicating interesting medieval priorities. Musicians earned their keep, playing almost continuously throughout daily activities. Instruments included bladder pipes, exactly what they sound like. Elaborate feasts featured subtleties. Food sculptures, such as pastry castles concealing live birds or marzipan knights riding roasted chicken horses. Castle employment makes modern workplace complaints seem trivial. With staffs ranging from 50 to 100 people, each position featured job titles that would appear ridiculous on contemporary resumes. Gong farmers cleaned castle toilets, worked exclusively at night, and earned wages exceeding skilled craftsmen. Kitchen staff processed approximately 6,000 calories per person daily compared to modern 2,000, working continuous shifts. Specialized roles included sauce makers and turnbrokes, children whose sole duty involved rotating spits above fire. Guards maintained intimidating appearances, sometimes required to sing while on duty proving wakefulness. Knights had obligations beyond fighting, equipment maintenance, squire training and endless ceremony. One knight's diary laments spending hours polishing armor only to stand in rain during lengthy ceremonies. The castle's true administrator was typically the lady, managing operations resembling combined small cities, military bases and farms. Medieval records show castle ladies maintaining detailed accounting books tracking everything from egg production to arrow usage. They managed food stockpiles, resolved staff disputes, sometimes commanded defenses during sieges, maintained medicinal gardens, educated children and managed complex finances. Medieval medical practices would horrify modern practitioners. Headache treatments included powdered emeralds, rose petals or human skull powder, considered so valuable that specialized storage cabinets exist. Medical textbooks resembled horror cookbooks with treatments like attaching shaved chickens to patients' heads, expecting the birds to absorb illnesses. Surgery occurred without anesthesia beyond alcohol consumption. Bloodletting addressed numerous conditions. One castle record prescribed the procedure for a knight deemed excessively enthusiastic about jousting. Medieval medicine cabinets contained items like dragon's blood, unicorn horn, and mummy powder, literally pulverized Egyptian mummy. Dental care involved either extraction or lead fillings. One record mentions a knight undergoing complete dental removal before battle to avoid distractions from toothaches. Remarkably, some treatments occasionally worked through inadvertent properties. Herb-infused applications contained natural antibiotics, while alcohol-based potions killed bacteria. One physician's notes proudly document his cure-all mixture of wine, honey and herbs resolving various conditions. The wine and honey likely provided genuine antiseptic benefit. After nightfall, castles transformed into shadow realms. Candles cost approximately daily wages, meaning darkness prevailed. Guards carried torches that often amplified shadows rather than diminishing them. Medieval ghost stories were taken seriously. Some castles established formal ghost protocols, requiring detailed reports including spectral fashion choices. Night watchmen received hazard pay for patrolling specific areas known for unusual occurrences. Every significant castle boasted authentic ghost stories, many having practical explanations. Kitchen ghosts, creating midnight stews, were often guards attempting secret snacks, while haunted libraries with relocating books were actually literature-loving rodents. Beyond ghosts, medieval bestiaries listed nocturnal creatures like nightcrawlers, bats, wall demons, mice and shadow lurkers, cats hunting aforementioned mice. Even seasoned knights weren't immune to nighttime frights. One journal justifies attacking a demon that was actually his reflection in a polished shield. Medieval dungeons weren't filled with wall-to-wall torture devices, but resembled uncomfortable timeout corners. Archaeological findings show average dungeons approximated modern bathroom sizes with inferior plumbing. Temperatures remained consistently cold year-round. Inmates financed their own sustenance and accommodation. One ledger documents a noble complaining about being charged for rat removal services that proved ineffective. The jailer reclassified rats as room companions, refusing luxury castles offered tiered dungeon accommodations. Ground floor cells featured windows and occasional furniture for nobles who had momentarily misplaced their decorum. Basement levels represented economy class with complimentary rodent roommates. Most inmates were debtors rather than violent criminals. Records indicate imprisonment for debts as minor as haircut costs. Escape attempts were infrequent not from security measures, but because communities were small. One failed escapee disguised as a washerwoman was recognized by his mother and dragged back by his ear. Dungeon keepers resembled underpaid hotel managers more than menacing jailers, handling inmate complaints about pillow softness and drafts. One French castle inmate established a business conducting cell tours for visitors, later selling souvenir rocks extracted from his cell wall until his release. Despite these peculiarities, dungeons remained profoundly unpleasant. Most people would go to considerable lengths to avoid confinement, including following castle regulations, which was perhaps the intended purpose all along. From highest towers to deepest cells, each dawn brought another cycle of medieval existence, a life dramatically different from romanticized depictions in modern entertainment.